Good evening and welcome to the problem of being awake. This video is back by popular demand. I'm redoing it because the audio on the initial one was not good enough for some of my subscribers, so I'm redoing it. It's about Henry VIII and probably the most misunderstood figure in British monarch history. It's a classic. This is a history you would have heard at school, even if you're up to the age of 70, probably. So Henry VIII was the last vassal warrior king. He was the last monarch of any nation to lead, well, Elizabeth did in a way, but he actually led his armies into battle. He was roughly 6 feet, which in today's world would have made him 6'7". Now, he was built like an absolute giant of a man, and he used to ride into war swinging a mattle base. And he had a rule that all of his cavalry had to be 2 horse lengths behind him. That's where we get the horse lengths coming into measurements in society. And he would crash into the front of an army and batter them. He was a feared warrior around the world. So why is that picture of that fat, squat man who seems to be a womanizer his legacy? I have no idea why they wanted it to be his legacy, but here's what actually happened to Henry VIII. He was the first king or monarch or anyone to ever be influenced and overridden by Parliament. So Parliament was very new in England. It had just been set up, and Thomas Cromwell is the Achilles heel in Henry VIII's reign. So Catherine of Aragon, his first wife, well, she was barren and she couldn't give him an heir. And Thomas Cromwell said, there are at least 3 families who are willing to go to war with you. You need to produce an heir. Otherwise they will go to war with you, they will kill you. And it's true, the War of the Roses came after this. But she couldn't, so he actually did divorce her, and he did accept excommunication from the Catholic Church and started the Church of England, which is a Protestant church, which gave birth to modern Christianity rather than Catholicism. And you know, even in that, it says he had all the monks killed. He didn't. He was asked this question. He was told the monks were upset by Thomas Cromwell, and he gave Thomas Cromwell said, just please placate them for me, deal with this. He did not mean mass murder all of them, which is what Thomas Cromwell did. He was one of the most evil men in history. So, he marries Anne Boleyn, who's the love of his life. And she's a bit of a more manipulative one, because even though she's had a love affair with him for years as a mistress, she ends up cheating on him, which is treason. However, he did go to Parliament for 5 days and battle the case for her not to be convicted of treason, not to be beheaded, but to be exiled. And he lost, and Parliament won, and they executed her. And what people don't know this, a lot of people don't know this, he walked her down to the guillotine and he held her hand and he had tears in his eyes. And so did she, obviously, but he had tears in his eyes as he held her hand while the guillotine took her head off. So that's not very nice, and that was under the direction of Thomas Cromwell. Following that, you have Jane Seymour, and this is the nice picture in Henry's life, because she was from a good family, it was a good marriage, and they fell in love. 10 years he was in love with this woman, and she gave him an heir, Edward, who ended up being sickly, but she gave him a male heir, and he was happy. At that point, he was still a strapping warrior. All of his muscles up here, not a slab of fat on his stomach. And then she died of natural causes, and I think that broke him. in terms of matrimony, in terms of parliamentary inclusion, in terms of invasion from Parliament, and his voice not counting for as much. They set up another marriage for him, Anne of Cleves, which lasted an incredibly short amount of time, but they remained very good friends till his dying day, and she actually ended up being given land in England and was the guardian for Prince Edward, his only son. So that's how close they were. And they remained close till his dying day. And then we've got, this is where he's now given up. He's lost the love of his life, and he's given up something that he shouldn't really have done. He basically just gave up on the idea of it, of love or anything like it. And then they forced him to marry 15-year-old Catherine Howard, and he was devastated, and he begged them not to make this happen, and they made it happen anyway. She was 15, he was in his late 30s at the time, which in these days would be 60s or 70s. And he just didn't want it, and he didn't consummate the marriage. She then had an affair with a young squire and was caught out. And the same thing happened, although this time Henry begs on his knees in Parliament to spare her life, not exile her, but send her back to her family. And he even admitted to not consummating the marriage in the first place. So it's not legally a marriage. This all got overruled. And Henry VIII spent his time in silence up until the day of the execution, didn't speak to a single person. And then he walked her down and held her hand as the guillotine chopped off her head. And then we have Catherine Parr, who was really just a nurse for him in his later days. He still kept in contact with Anne of Cleves. But Catherine Parr, he did marry, but she was very much a confidant and a friend, rather than anything that could produce an heir or anything like it. So hence you have Mary Queen of Scots and Elizabeth I being his two only living children. So that's the story of Henry VIII, and the bad guy in the story is Thomas Cromwell at every single stage. And people don't know that. And that we see a little fat man when we should see a strikingly tall, thin man. That's how history should have gone. But Thomas Cromwell destroyed Henry VIII. And you won't hear that taught in textbooks in schools. Certainly not now. They don't have to teach history. So I'll leave it there. I hope you enjoyed this and got something out of it. And I will come back with some good stuff soon. So I look forward to speaking to you again. You be good, I'll be lucky, and I'll see you soon.